Welcome to the next segment of my Speaking for Success podcast. Today, I'm pleased to welcome past international president Jim Kokocki. Jim has now, because I have a background, this probably won't show very well, but he's written this book called Secrets to Becoming an Effective Public Speaker. We're going to talk mainly about some things related to his book today. So welcome, Jim. Thanks for this. So first of all, what prompted you to write this book?
Me to write that book? Well, I've been doing some speaking for fees in recent years, and I'd like to grow that business. And part of growing the business is having a product that people can purchase. It also helps with public relations and my visibility. It's helped immensely. It's available in 3 local bookstores in Atlantic Canada, and not more because I haven't worked to get them in more local bookstores. But additionally, it just allows me to share some of the thoughts and the concepts and the tricks and tips that I've developed over the years and have been shared with me. So I've got good feedback on the material, and I'm delighted to produce that.
Great. So just out of curiosity, how long did it take you to write the book?
How long did it take me? There's several ways to look at it. I guess when I finally settled down and committed to it, probably about a year. So that wasn't a year of 5 days a week, 4 or 8 hours a day. It was done over time. And that's generally the way I need to work. It's write, don't edit, put it aside, come back, read it, then edit, and continue to build upon it. So about a year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, and did it take you time to get it from thinking about it to actually sitting down and doing it?
Definitely. And I'll say as Toastmasters, it's a pretty available evolution, I think, for folks, because it fits well with how I develop speeches. When I develop speeches now, after all the experience I've developed, I put down some concepts and I think about them, and then I try to rearrange them and put them together and think, if I talk about this or write about this, where does that lead? So there's a lot of planning involved before finally sitting down and writing elements.
Right. And yeah, I was talking when I talked with Ted Corcoran, and we talked about structure, and we talked about that, and figuring out the best way so things flow. And the message is there. One of the things that you talk about as a format in your book is the past, present, future. And I've heard you suggest that for table topics as well as a way of approaching table topics. What made you settle on that format?
Probably failure in table topics over the years. and somebody may have suggested to me, I can't recall. That's life's like that, right? We get suggestions and we forget about them and then they come back. But I love that structure, and it just works well. It's often my starting point for a speech, starting point for a book. It works well for table topics. So, you asked me about my career in Toastmasters, I'll tell you about the shy computer programmer who was visited in 1987, and that's the past, and currently past international president, etc. And then I can easily bridge into what the next 5 years may hold. So it's a beautiful structure that always works, and the audience appreciates it because it inserts structure into any answer. So I love it.
Yeah, and I certainly, since I heard you recommended for a table topic, I've certainly recommended it to others who are struggling with table topics as a way of trying to approach it. In Toastmasters, quite often our speeches tend to be one and done. And given that, do you think that we practice the right skills, or are we just practicing the wrong way to do things? So, like they say, practice makes perfect, but practicing the wrong things makes doing the wrong things perfect.
I love the question, and the whole organization is built to empower individuals to become more effective communicators and leaders. And so people can speak about whatever they like. And as you say, some speeches will be one and done and it's not reusable. But if someone's got a bigger goal, if someone's got a bigger vision, if someone's speaking about their passions, things they're working on or want to work on or excited about or concerned about, then you've got a bigger vision. And those speeches become reusable assets. And I truly believe that sometimes we need to speak it to understand the value. Sometimes we figure that out as we're speaking. And often we figure it out because of the questions people ask for clarity or by what our evaluator tells us. So I wouldn't say we're doing it wrong, but I would encourage anybody to have that bigger vision. Like what are you concerned about? Is it homelessness? Is it poverty? Is it animal welfare? And speak about that. And those topics, there's probably 10 speeches within there. So just start, do a 5 to 7 minute speech and find out how the audience reacts and how you feel afterwards.
And certainly when we speak about the things that we're passionate about, then we tend to do a better speech because of that passion. It comes across, and we should let it come across in our speeches.
And I'd like to comment as well, one of our projects these days in Pathways, Love Pathways, is to do some research. So in my view, that doesn't mean you need to go research something you know nothing about. In my view, that suggests do a little more research about your passion and add that in and have a reusable asset.
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to understand that it is okay to do speeches on the same topic and, but making sure that you're tailoring it to the project. Or in my very first podcast, I talked about having basically a framework or a skeleton that you use. And one that I do a fair bit is the idea of transformation and becoming the butterfly and letting your wings. But I can bring in different things. I can talk about leadership. I can talk about using pathways. I can talk about contests, all attached to that framework. And so it gives me that basic structure that then you can develop something fairly quickly, but you've got a different speech each time. And if you're an area director, for an example, who has to go speak to different clubs and give a speech, it allows them to use more or less the same thing, but tailor it to the needs of the particular club.
Agreed. Yes, I've heard some very competent speakers say things like, I've only got 3 or 4 speeches. They're really talking about core material that they use to adapt to their audience situation, etc. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And I mean, you see that with the professional speakers, and you see it with folks like Craig Valentine and that group. It's a lot of the same thing, because I mean, often, for one thing, you're delivering it to different audiences. They haven't heard it before. So
even audiences who've heard it before forget.
Well, that's true. Sometimes I forget.
Of course.
I wonder what I said in that one. And you talk about using stories. And I'm wondering, do you think that the point of the story needs to be pointed out, or do you let the audience figure it out for themselves?
Please point it out for the audience, make it clear. A structure that many speakers use is tell a story, make a point, or make the point, tell a story, or make a point, tell a story, make the point. Don't assume the audience gets it. And that's valuable, just simply to make sure it lands. But audiences are distracted, and we are ever more distracted in 2021 than we've ever been. So that's not demeaning to your audience. Just make sure that you're doing all you can to land the point.
Yeah. And I certainly heard stories told when I'm wondering, I wonder why they told that. Or I talked to someone afterwards, and so like I say to you, well, I think that it was, and you say, oh no, I thought the point of it, and we have completely different ideas of what we think the point of the story is if it has not been pointed out.
Hmm.
And when you're using stories, do you just use your own stories, or do you also use other people's stories?
I'm happy to use other people's stories and sometimes attribute it to them or exaggerate and put myself in the story. You know, the purpose of telling the story isn't to be 100% accurate. It's a tool to make a point. So I've exaggerated. I'll continue to exaggerate. I can't think of any situations where I have appropriated someone else's story and put myself in it, but I wouldn't be opposed to doing that. I get the purpose in doing a speech and communicating to an audience is to make a point, to move them in some direction. So you use all the tools available to you.
Yeah, and I agree with, like, it, to me, it's okay to change minor points. I have heard of people giving a speech about, you know, their mother dying and their mother is still alive. I have a little bit of a problem with that, but I know one time somebody was using a story about my mother, and but then say, well, my friend's mother, it just didn't flow very well.
Hmm.
And I said, why don't you just say my aunt?
Mhm.
I said, it doesn't change the point. Doesn't matter that it's my mother. That's not the
Mhm.
important thing. It's
Hmm.
what you're saying about what happened. That's what's important. And so, you know, changing something like that to allow things to flow is fine. And
Good point. Yeah, it needs to be credible and congruent. And if you've got some audience members saying, "Oh, wait a minute, her mom's alive," you've lost that person.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, when I'm telling people about being a role model and everything, I often use you as an example with dressing differently when you became a district leader, and because you said I need to be a role model.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I think other people's stories can help you illustrate a point well. If you had to pick one of the points that you talked about as kind of being the most important thing that people should know, what would it be?
See, so this is it's primarily a Toastmaster audience. I would say, I'm not sure if this is in the book directly, but answering the question, I'd say, you know, look at your club environment is a place to experiment, it's to push your skills. And recently I did a presentation to a university class and they asked about gestures, and I made the point that, look, sometimes we need to go too far to find out what's the right amount, particularly with gestures. People are, when they start, they're so nervous and tight, and they need to go too far to find out what's right, the right amount of gestures. So I just encourage people to take some more risks at their club, have some fun. It's a place, I don't like the term, it's a place to fail, not to have consequences. It's a place to experiment and have some fun, to find out your true voice and your way you interact with your audience. So please do some experimentation.
Yeah, I like that it's a place to experiment rather than saying it's a place to fail, because I sometimes think people take that the wrong way. They say, and they say, well, doesn't matter if I do it right. And rather than saying, oh, there aren't the consequences, but now I learn from that and improve. Some people just say, you know, it's a safe place to fail, so I don't have to try. But so I like the experiment, and that is important. I mean, that's what I'm doing with the podcast. I said, when I saw that as an elective in level 4, and I thought, that's never going to be me doing a podcast. But if you don't try, you're never going to know whether you can do it. And you learn new things by doing it. So yes, I really like that. I'm going to take that and use it. And telling people to experiment.
I want to give an example too, as we're talking about that, because we talked about reusing material. So one speech that I do is about not being, don't be defined by your past. And to do that speech, I talk about my old favorite rock band called Mott the Hoople, who probably one of your thousands of viewers will understand. But it was interesting because one of the speeches I had to do was to use a prop. So as I was thinking about what prop could I use that might enhance the message, I saw the old album I bought back in 1975 that's weathered and beaten up, and it was just such a fantastic prop. And it was a fun little experimentation, and to pass that around and to people to look at the wear and the tear and the guys in the band from the 70s. And experimentation's rewarding.
Yeah, it is for sure. And of course, it might be, well, mind you, the albums are vinyl is making a bit of a comeback, but there could be people in your audiences. Record? What's that?
Some might think that's super cool. Maybe one or two.
Yeah, it's like one time I was talking about, looking up phone numbers, and that, I didn't have numbers saved because I just remember but when I have a number saved, then I don't remember it. But I forget exactly how I did it. And then somebody said, well, you might want to refer to it this way because we don't look it up or whatever, It's like, oh, okay. One of those generational things. So now that so much of what we're doing is online, whether it's our Toastmasters meetings or meetings in a corporation or anything, do you think that the advice that you give in your book holds true for presenting online?
I can't think of anything in there that doesn't hold true off the top of my head. No, and we're still trying to connect with people. So eye contact is different, but it's still relevant. I've been on some calls where someone's got a second screen set up and they're looking at the second screen, and that's distracting. There is still need for gestures, for vocal variety. No, we're still communicating with people. And it's going to be interesting when we do more hybrid meetings in Toastmasters and in the business world and the social services world and the not-for-profit world. We're going to have to adapt those skills once again. So I think the lessons remain the same.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I find it interesting that there are a certain number of people who's like, oh, can't wait to get back to an in-person meeting. And, then you've got people that, I don't know, I kind of like online. But there is going to be a relearning for people. And for some people, it's going to be a brand new learning because they've only been online. But I think it's important that we continue to have some aspect of the online so that we don't lose the skills that we have developed, because, the basics are the same. There are some differences in the way in which you approach things, like remembering to hold your hands up here instead of down here when you're gesturing, that type of thing. And you don't want to lose that, I think, by going back to the in-person.
No, and I'd like to comment on that too, because we're not practicing just to be great Toastmasters. Of course, we want to be great Toastmasters, but we want to be effective communicators in the world. The world will be hybrid. If people want to be strong communicators and leaders, we're going to need to learn to manage that world, the hybrid world.
Yeah, I think that my next blog on the website, which will be, mine goes on next week, is about that, is that it's not just to become the best Toastmaster we can be, but it's to learn skills that we can use. And, it's something I think when we're thinking about how meetings are run and everything, that, is this a way that we would do it in the outside world as well, so that we're developing those skills. Sometimes when you give a speech, the evaluator may disagree with what you say and take issue with the content in the evaluation. Do you find it difficult to separate content and structure and delivery, like if you don't agree with the content?
I can't recall. I remember one example from a long time ago where somebody did use some offensive content. And I would say back then I did. I have to answer in this way, I suppose. I don't see a lot of content that offends me. I guess I've seen some that I would subtly disagree with. And no, I think my skills have developed to the point where I can detach myself to look at structure, vocal varieties, effectiveness of message delivery. Personally, no, I think I've become effective at doing that. Did the speaker do an effective job of landing his or her message with the audience? And did he or she use all the tools available well?
Mhm. Okay, great. Now, this next question is very much for Toastmasters listening to this, since that will be the majority of the audience, I'm sure. And you said earlier that you like pathways. So what would you say to somebody who says, I've been doing this for, I've been a Toastmaster for 10, 20, 40 years, whatever the case might be. I don't need to do pathways.
Well, I'd say if they want to continue on the developmental path, if they still want to improve the communication and leadership skills as you do and as I do, they should be doing projects that exercise their skills. And I've got at least 3 or 4 examples about people who volunteered to me that they love pathways. So here's the shortest one. I met a nurse. I was in Taiwan. I was at a Toastmaster event. She came up and she said, I love pathways. She said, I've been a head nurse for 20 years. And people have always thought I'm bossy and I'm pushy. And I've never understood why. She said, they just did the program on understanding my communication style. She said, Jim, I've made some very small changes. People are reacting to me differently. And so I love the story because she doesn't know precisely what she's done. She said she made some very small changes and made a significant change in how she's perceived and how she works with others. So I've got 3 other examples of that I didn't go searching for, that have been volunteered. So I'm convinced that if somebody works through pathways and puts the effort into it, they will come to some sort of transformation. I can't tell you when or how, but it'll happen. I want to give you another example, because a gentleman in one of my clubs was doing the effective coaching path. And he said he's a professional sales manager. So he's got a team. And he said one of the projects forced him to talk to somebody outside of Toastmasters who he coaches. So he said, well, this is kind of a pain, but not a big deal. I can talk to one of my employees. And he sat down full of attitude and talked with one of his employees and said, so how am I doing as a coach? And the response was, not that great, not that great. I'm often confused about what you want me to finish by the end of the month. I don't get much communication or advice. So I'm delighted in that story, and that he shared that story, because if he had not done a Pathways project, at some point a boss was going to come along and tap him on the shoulder, say, here's your last check. We'll give you a reference if you like. Best wishes on your next employment opportunity. So those are 2 examples of people who've reached some significant transformations because they worked through pathways.
Yeah, I met somebody down in Dallas back when Pathways was just coming in, and so it was still during the transition period. And he had already done 3 or 4 paths. He told me that he had no plan to do pathways. He had it all laid out, how he was going to get the various advanced communicator designations and everything. He had his manuals picked. He bought his manuals, and it was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm not interested in pathways. And then one day he decided to have a look at pathways and give it a little try. He said, all of a sudden he realized that it was much more relevant to his work than what he was doing in the traditional program. So he just dropped what he was doing with that and transitioned completely to pathways. And as I said, at that point, he had done 3 or 4 paths, and it was still early on. So he was definitely
Mhm.
going for it. Of course, he belonged to several clubs, so he had more speaking opportunities. But again, an example of, no, I'm not going to do it. And then you look at it and say, oh, there's benefit to this.
There is. It's interesting to talk about it too, because I think it's making me think I might do table topics in one of my clubs about, look, what are some of the significant learnings you've realized because of pathways? I think I'll do that. I'm not sure how that will go, but there's got to be some more stories. I want to complement the 4 stories I've got.
Well, and of course, the thing that you could do with that is when you do it, is you could record those table topics.
Mhm.
And with people's agreements, then you could chunk them up and put them one at a time on the club Facebook page
Absolutely.
as a way of promoting what it's done. Actually, you could maybe get them to do it for helping us to promote Toastmasters Day, because we want some videos on how people have benefited from
Hmm.
Toastmasters that we can then put on LinkedIn and Facebook and everything to help promote Toastmasters Day on October 22nd. So do you have any final words of wisdom about being an effective speaker?
Final words of wisdom, that's intimidating. I think the key is I've been doing another set of presentations around serve your world, soothe your soul, and getting people thinking about that bigger purpose. So I'm encouraging people to listen to the voices in their head, because if I said, hey Heather, what's your purpose on this planet? That's intimidating. No one wants that for a table topic, but you talk to yourself all the time. You're saying things like, why isn't somebody doing something about the lack of employment in my neighborhood, about the litter on the streets, about poverty? Why aren't people taking some more paths to make some improvements? And if you listen to that and you talk about it, even you just express that you're concerned about this and you think somebody should be doing something, that'll energize your audience. And some people will say, I know somebody who's working in that area. Would you like me to connect you? Or I want to help you with that. I haven't got it figured out either. So talk about your passions. Talk about things that you speak with any sort of passion with friends and family about, and it will help you clarify your purpose. Probably generate some action that makes some progress in that area, and you'll become a better speaker and leader. You'll become a more effective communicator and leader by doing so.
Well, thank you, Jim. And I want to say to everyone, a little reminder that this is a Pathways project, elective and level 4. Experiment, try it. If you want to do a podcast series that's Toastmasters related, let either me or Crystal Cobb, our program quality director, know. You can do it. We will host it on the district YouTube channel, so it gives you a place to put your podcast. Take that opportunity to learn. It's been a learning experience for me, and I've been a Toastmaster for a long time. I'm a lot older than an awful lot of you, so if I can do it, you should be able to do it. Again, thank you, Jim, for taking the time to share with us some secrets on becoming an effective public speaker. I just realized, though, there was a reason I asked you about how long it took you to write the book, because Jim has written another book about road trips to hockey games and stuff. How long did that one take you?
That one took less because, if I may, actually, that was a result of a speech as well. I had to do a speech to entertain an audience at a Toastmaster club. I spoke about how I came to visit all the major league ballparks. I'm kind of proud, kind of embarrassed about how I did that. But when I did the speech, the audience reaction was, oh, that's pretty cool. So I decided to write about that. But I found anything I'd written was over the decade was unorganized and hard to find and no photos. And then the idea popped into my head, it would be cool to visit all the Quebec Major League hockey teams and see a game in a year. And so I did that in the height of winter. So that one was easier because I had a clear vision of what it looked like, and I just made notes as I went. I typed as I went. So that one probably took, I don't know, 6 months. And I'll say additionally, I then had experience about how to use Kindle Direct Publishing, which is an amazing deep infrastructure. So that one was much quicker.
Oh, good. Okay, yes, I did want to make mention of that book before we
Thanks.
wrap things up here. So thanks again, and tune in for the upcoming podcasts. Have a good day, all.